Welcome back to Watch the Booker Man and to episode number 54 of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. We're just going straight into the episode. It's the fallout from Turning Point, and following the opening sequence of the show, Mauro and Taz welcome viewers to Impact, putting over the great night of action that took place on Sunday. They, however, have to lead with some less positive news as we give an update on the condition of Sting. Having been hit with a loaded elbow strike by Chris Hero, Sting was pinned by the New Age member, resulting in the TNA Dream Team losing that match. But in the days that followed, more bad news. It was confirmed that Sting has suffered a concussion and will be out of action as a result. Tonight, we will hear from the New Age in the middle of the ring after the most impressive victory since their arrival in TNA, while Christopher Daniels will face Bryan Danielson, who he is accused of attacking on last week's show. Opening up the action for the night though, Jay Lethal will get his chance of revenge against the man who ruined his proposal to Maria last week, and that's our opening match. I often do this after a pay-per-view, a sort of 10-minute match that gives us the chance to just go through all the things from the pay-per-view that require fallout, Mauro and Taz putting over what's to come on the show, and we also get a decent match in there. Jay Lethal is looking to build a little bit of momentum, but as he looks to mount his comeback and take Matt Morgan down, he is kicked in the balls by Morgan. A straight up intentional disqualification. Morgan isn't so bothered about the result here as much as he is intent on further humiliating Jay Lethal. It's an okay match that gains heat to the storyline. Matt Morgan with a solid performance, Jay Lethal a little bit disappointing. But after the match is where the storyline progresses, as despite Jay Lethal picking up a DQ victory, Matt Morgan isn't done with him as the bell rings. He grabs him by the throat and throws him to the outside, and then once on the outside, drops him throat first onto the barricade. Maria Kanellis does all she can to stop Morgan, but there's little she can do, and herself is then dragged to the ground by Madison Rayne, who was also at ringside. Matt Morgan launches Jay Lethal into the steel steps, dislodging them. This allows him to set up for that carbon footprint that he does, the one that took out Amazing Red for a couple of months, the one that he attempted on Hernandez. However, when he drags Jay Lethal back to his feet and steps back for his run-up, Lethal drops straight to the floor. He can't even support his own weight now. A little bit of another humiliating moment for him. Morgan seems happy enough with this and turns to Rayne, who is holding Maria down and pulling her hair, and just sort of points and laughs at Jay Lethal, belittling the man who is over a foot shorter than him. Instead of attempting to hold him up again and take him out of action, Morgan shakes his head, pointing at Jay Lethal on the ground. With a smirk on his face, Morgan leaves up the ramp with Madison Rayne. Of course, Maria's again in a terrible way, really upset with what's happened, and it's further building this storyline where Matt Morgan is looking down on him and trying to belittle him, and hopefully Morgan coming across as a real dick here, and Jay Lethal, he doesn't seem to be able to deal with the strength and power of Matt Morgan at the minute, but we'll see how things develop there. Heading over to a studio setting, Mike Tenay looks back on the events of Turning Point, putting over everything that happened but choosing to spotlight Bobby Lashley's victory over Samoa Joe for analysis, and to confirm that Bobby Lashley will speak on next week's episode, both Joe and Lashley not on tonight. Before Mike Tenay can go even more in depth though, Mr. Anderson walks into the shot and he tells Mike Tenay that they really need to be more careful when recording these little things. He's lucky it was Anderson who walked through the door and not some dangerous psychopath. Tenay gives Anderson a look, remembering the attack on Jeff Jarrett from a couple of weeks back. Considering what he did then, it couldn't be much worse than somebody like Anderson showing up. Mr. Anderson though says he's not here to start trouble, and he wants to join Mike Tenay in his analysis. He wants to talk about his match at Turning Point. He feels that that was the standout display, and he wants Mike to analyse the beating that he gave the TNA founder and Mike's good friend Jeff Jarrett. He wants him to analyse the 3 count that put Jeff Jarrett down, and he wants him to analyse Anderson's arm being raised while Jarrett was out cold. Mike Tenay is of course resistant, pushes back against Mr. Anderson, but Anderson says it doesn't matter. He doesn't need any of that for Mike Tenay to be able to tell everybody what they all saw. Mr. Anderson was proved right on Sunday, and he is going to keep being proved right because he is untouchable. He's got a freedom about his character at the minute where he'll just go and do whatever he wants, say whatever he wants, and seemingly there are no repercussions because he doesn't care if they suspend him or fire him or whatever. In the interview area, Christy Hemme then speaks with Jeff Hardy, the only member of the TNA Dream Team who is in the Impact Zone tonight. She mentions that, and Jeff speaks about the disappointment of losing that match, but emphasises that this war is far from over. Hardy says that he's heard that the New Age are going to be in the ring later tonight to say their piece, but he doesn't think anybody wants to stick around and listen to what they have to say. We've all already heard enough from them. They're well within their rights to go out there and speak their mind, but Jeff has got something to say, and he's going to say his piece too. AJ Styles isn't here tonight. Sting isn't here tonight, so Jeff may not have the army behind him like Jimmy Jacobs does, but he knows that every fan in the Impact Zone is here with him, as well as all those watching at home. So a valiant babyface promo from Jeff Hardy. He is going to walk into New Age territory tonight, confronting the enemy, and he says that nobody is going to want to miss what he has got in mind. He's going to lay down a proposal to the New Age, and it's going to be a pretty big challenge to stick around for. Another not so good segment. Hopefully we can get at least one really strong segment, because then the show should overall get a decent rating, given that we have Bryan Danielson and Christopher Daniels in the main event. It's actually Daniels' partner, Frankie Kazarian, who returns to singles action after the dissolution of Bad Influence last week, and he picks up a victory over Sonjay Dutt with a fade to black. A 68 is a pretty good rating, happy with that, definitely. Good heat and decent wrestling, both with 63 rated performances. Two really solid in-ring competitors. I can imagine this being a really good match, and while Dutt has been built up over the last month, we are selling here that he was in a match on Sunday that took a lot out of him. It is 4 days later, but Frankie Kazarian, by virtue of being the fresher of the two competitors, just edges Sonjay Dutt on the night. No shame in that, and that leads into a post-match segment. After the celebration of Frankie Kazarian, Larry Sweeney comes out to the top of the ramp and takes a microphone. He says that since his World X Cup co-host is in no fit state to do so, he's going to promote this Saturday's Phase 1 Decider, the upcoming special episode of Explosion. Larry asks for the standings to be put up on the big screen before he explains that any of the 5 teams can still reach the top of the table this Saturday, and all but Puerto Rico can be eliminated, and that's the key thing. One team will be out of the World X Cup by the end of this Saturday's Explosion. Explosion will feature 2 matches outside of the regular tournament format. Everything else has been pretty straightforward, but these are kind of the wild card matches where all 5 team captains will face off in an elimination match, where each individual elimination is worth 3 points. So if Kazuchika Okada pins all 4 of the other guys, he will gain 12 points for his team. So it's potentially a massive match that could completely change the complexion of the tournament. Before that, the other 10 competitors, the non-captains, will go up against each other in a battle royal, the last remaining wrestler earning 5 points for his country. So again, that could be huge. For instance, if Team UK win that, they'll go from dead last to second place, so definitely not over for anybody. He puts over that Kazuchika Okada is hot off a victory over the man who is laid out in the ring right now, and he is Sweeney's pick to lead his team to the World X Cup. Dutt and Sweeney very much at each other's throats throughout this World X Cup. They've been conducting interviews with the competitors on Explosion, and all the time they've been throwing barbs at each other. That's a really good rating actually, with it being a Larry Sweeney promo. He's not that over, but his entertainment skills and the benefit of him improvising well means that 58, I'm really impressed with that. We then interview Christopher Daniels, and Jeremy Borash asks him about his match with Bryan Danielson tonight and his words from last week, specifically talking about his decline in 2010, the end of Bad Influence as a stable, and then the end of him and Frankie as a tag team. Christopher Daniels says that first he wants to clear something up, pointing out that in this country there is something called innocent until proven guilty, but everybody seems to have forgotten that because they all assume that he took Bryan out last week, even though there is zero evidence. JB says, is this a denial? Did he do it? But Daniel says that isn't the point. What does matter is him finding the winning formula once more, and he thinks he's got it. Counting with his fingers, Daniel says that they tried to work in a 3 with Matt Morgan, and it didn't work. and then he and Kazarian tried to make it work with just the two of them, and that didn't work either. So now there's just one, going up against one of the most highly regarded competitors in the world, something that he was considered this time last year. Sunday at Turning Point, he wasn't on the card. The year before, he was challenging for the World Heavyweight Championship. So what now? Kazarian proved in that last match that he's got what it takes to go it alone. So does that make Daniels the weak link in all this? If he loses to Bryan tonight, then he's all out of ideas. He's got no more answers. And maybe it's time he tried something else or somewhere else. Maybe it's time for Daniels to walk away. So the promo here, essentially Daniels putting his TNA career on the line. It's nothing binding, it's not a contractual thing, but Daniels is essentially saying he's tried everything at this point. He's tried 3, he's tried 2. If 1 doesn't work, then he might as well be out of here. It's not that good of a rating despite him improvising well, but I do think that it's going to deliver a solid main event, so no worries there. And back to the ring, we talk about the blockbuster debut of the Beautiful People show last week, and the second episode, not quite as big names in the guests, but it is continuing a little storyline that's been going on. ODB, Brooke Tessmacher and Lacey Von Erich continuing this brewing rivalry between the two sides. Angelina Love and Velvet try a little bit of divide and conquer coming between the trio. First they ask if Lacey feels like she made the right choice when she stepped out from under their learning tree, turned her back, betrayed the Beautiful People, and it looks like she hit every branch of that tree on the way down to ODB. Lacey retorts that they just wanted her to carry their bags, whereas ODB looks out for her and Brooke. She's trying to help them. This then turns the question towards the mentor as Angelina Love asks what's in it for ODB. Velvet says that she finds it all a little bit creepy, this older woman trying to take these young prospects under her wings, and they wonder if there's some sort of ulterior motive. ODB says that it's clear that nobody ever taught Angelina Love and Velvet Sky how to fight properly, and she just wanted to make sure Brooke and Lacey didn't follow that path. Unlike them, she isn't selfish, and she actually cares about the Knockouts division maintaining some standards. Love is offended by this, but says she isn't going to do anything since she's already in action later tonight. She's more than confident that their upcoming opponents will have it covered anyway. Angelina Love and Velvet Sky then leave the ring as we go into the third match of the night. Not a very good segment. Does continue the storyline, but not really great. Followed by a poor match actually, but it is the 3 women of the New Age, Alyssa, Flash and Mischief, looking to prove themselves after a disappointment at Turning Point, while we spotlight Sara Del Rey, who incredibly took Awesome Kong down with a Royal Butterfly, one of the best feats of strength we've ever seen from a TNA knockout. But it is Alyssa Flash who gets the pinfall victory over Brooke Tessmacher with a Flash driver, and we see that she's very much a woman on a mission on the night. After those back-to-back defeats, after such a good year, she was desperate to get back to winning ways, and she did that. Brooke Tessmacher, the weak link, in a poor match, despite there being some decent performances in there. I suppose with it only being 4 minutes, just under 5 minutes, it's fair enough really, as well as Brooke and Lacey, the two inexperienced competitors, being off their game, but nonetheless it makes the New Age look very, very strong, and we continue after the match to put them over, with Jimmy Jacobs joining the decisively victorious trio in the ring. The leader of the New Age first puts over the incredible performance of Sara Del Rey at Turning Point and her shocking feat of strength that secured her victory over Awesome Kong, a clean, decisive win. Mickie James and Tara may have escaped with the Knockouts tag team titles, but on the night, the New Age backed up their talk. This brings Jimmy Jacobs to Jeff Hardy, the last man standing of the so-called TNA Dream Team. Sting was taken out, AJ Styles seemingly unwilling to show his face, so in a sense, Jeff Hardy has Jimmy's respect, and as a result, he's going to offer him some friendly advice. Looking straight down the camera with a deadpan expression, Jimmy Jacobs tells Jeff Hardy not to interrupt them tonight because it won't end well for him. That's the end of the first hour, and Jimmy Jacobs further promoting that segment at the end of the show. It's actually going to happen after the main event match, with Jimmy Jacobs and the New Age going face to face with Jeff Hardy. We then return to the second hour of the show, and Kurt Angle comes out, putting over his successful World Heavyweight Championship defense against Abyss. The champion is sore and clearly still feeling the effects of the match, but he says that he proved once again why he is the best wrestler on the planet, like he said last month, what is next for Kurt Angle? This gimmick that he's had kind of throughout the year, or not really a gimmick, but line him up and I'll take him down. Who he faces isn't up to him, but he'd be lying if he said he didn't have somebody in mind. Whoever that somebody was, it's not the person who does make their way out from the back first. We can tell that from Kurt Angle's expression as Mr. Anderson comes out, a previous rival of Kurt Angle, and he tells Kurt that he did a little bit of analysis earlier, but he thought he'd come and give his insight on Kurt directly to him. I've just noticed the segment rating, and 98 is one of the best angles that we've ever done. Gaining heat, I have no question, to these storylines. That is brilliant. Getting into what Anderson actually says, he talks about Bound for Glory, where Kurt avoided defeat by ducking out of the way just a couple of seconds early. Last night, 1 second was the difference. Both men were down at 9 seconds, and Kurt just managed to scratch his way back to his feet. His analysis is simple. He's not trying to play down Kurt Angle's victories, but in his eyes, Kurt Angle is on a sharp decline. The start of this reign saw him picking up decisive victories month after month, but that's not what's happening right now. Anderson wants a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship because he knows exactly the weaknesses of Kurt Angle that he can exploit to take the title. Kurt seems pretty dismissive of this, but Anderson sort of laughs it off. He's not worried at all that Kurt doesn't want the match to happen. He'll be back next week, and Mr. Anderson says that Kurt will have no choice but to accept, because what he's going to present to the entire world will leave everybody with no doubt that he deserves to be the next number one contender. So setting up a segment for next week, hopefully it can be as good as that, because that was absolutely brilliant. Mr. Anderson doing a fantastic job, given how some of the segments were kind of bombing with Jeff Jarrett involved in. It shows just how good Anderson is, but he does need that other person in there to bounce off, and for both of them to put in an excellent performance. Absolutely delighted with that segment, obviously, and no matter how good the main event is now, we're probably on for a pretty solid show. We then brought in two guys from FIP, I think they were, a company that recently closed down, so I just thought I'd bring two of their guys in. I think they might have been the last tag team champions, although I might be misremembering. Gerald Clark and Nui Lee. Not that familiar with them, but they are defeated decisively by the Motor City Machine Guns, and this is just something I'm doing sort of every now and again. Bring a team in, give them a chance. If we see some decent individual ratings, they're people we can consider signing. Probably not based on this, we won't be bringing them in, but nonetheless, getting a 6-minute match on TV against the World Tag Team Champions is good for them, and a Made in Detroit secures the victory for the Motor City Machine Guns. Those ratings again, I've not yet made that change that I mentioned about the attributes. I think I might do that after the show, to be fair. Join the Motor City Machine Guns in the ring after their victory. Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin come out from the back, going face to face with the World Tag Team Champions. Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team extend a hand to Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. The commentators put over the fact that both teams were victorious at Turning Point, with WGTT defeating Beer Money to earn a shot at the World Tag Team titles. MCMG accept the handshake, they defeated LAX. The two teams both ready for their first time ever tag team dream match, whenever that might be. We're not giving too much away this week, it's just enough I think that both teams can be on screen and we see them face to face, and of course we're all looking forward to that tag team match between those two with the World Tag Team titles on the line. We then switch attention back to tonight's main event, with Bryan Danielson interviewed by Jeremy Borash responding to Christopher Daniels' words from earlier. He has the exact same questions. This time last year, when Bryan Danielson was embarking on a new chapter of his own, he looked over at Daniels here in TNA and he saw one of the best wrestlers in the world, one of the guys who he thought he might never get to face again, but who he'd love to share a ring with. Now, he's in TNA and he asks, where is that Christopher Daniels, the one who came within seconds of becoming the World Heavyweight Champion just 12 months ago? Bryan doesn't care where that Daniels has been or what the excuses for his absence are. He just wants him to show up tonight. Last week, Daniels jumped in from behind, not like a fighter or a competitor, but like a coward. With that said, Daniels would go up immeasurably if he just came out tonight and left all that BS at the door and wrestled him. He asks if Daniels remembers how to do that. If he doesn't, and he can't bring that tonight in a main event match on Impact, then maybe he's right. Maybe it is time for Daniels to step away from this company and reevaluate his career altogether. So a decent rating for Bryan's promo there. We then get a match between Angelina Love and Tara, the Beautiful People member, picking up a victory, a distraction from Velvet Sky when she uses the hairspray. It was a big gimmick for the Beautiful People in around 2009. I've not used it much, but we're bringing it back here so that a blinded Tara can be pinned by Angelina Love. It's a way of keeping Tara strong, but giving the Beautiful People that victory they need to be viable challengers to the titles. And following the match, Mickie James joins Tara in the ring, grabbing a bottle of water to try and clear the hairspray out of her partner's eyes. Angelina Love and Velvet Sky stand at the top of the ramp, signifying their intentions, as I said, to become the next Knockouts Tag Team Champions. A fairly simple segment that gets a very poor rating, actually, losing heat to the storyline after what was a pretty decent match. But we go then into a segment with Jay Lethal and Maria, and he's approached by the cameras. There's no interviewer here. He's been seen to the medics or whatever, which seems to be a recurring thing for him, and he's asked about what's gone on in the last couple of weeks, and Jay Lethal is understandably furious. He says that after Bound for Glory, he really didn't think things could get any worse. He had a few months from hell before that show, and since, things have gone just as badly. Jay's clearly emotional, and his girlfriend Maria tries to calm him down, but he's had enough. He tells Maria to let him speak as he rants about Matt Morgan ruining his proposal and then this week laying him out. Lethal says that he doesn't care when it is or where. He demands that Paul Heyman gives him another match with Matt Morgan. He again goes back to that segment from the first episode that we did. He reminds Heyman that he wanted more from him. He wanted a serious Jay Lethal. Well, he couldn't be more serious when he tells him that he wants Morgan. He did everything that Paul Heyman asked of him, and he lost everything. He now asks for one thing from Paul Heyman. He's got nothing to lose, and he's going to show that when he gets his hands on Matt Morgan. We go into that main event match between Bryan Danielson and Christopher Daniels, and it is 12.5-minute match. A 71 is good. We all know how good a match between these two would be. They've got good chemistry, and it did get the crowd buzzing, so it did do a good job on the night. And with the segment rating we had between Anderson and Kurt Angle earlier, this is going to be a very, very strong episode of Impact. Danielson just edging Daniels in the individual performances, and after that 12.5 minutes, he also edges him in the ring, making Daniels tap out to the cattle mutilation. In terms of what it means for Daniels' future, it does seem to only point in one direction. Nonetheless, a really good victory for Bryan Danielson. He's picked up some pretty significant victories since he's come to the company, and this is another notch on his belt. Following the match, Bryan Danielson has his arm raised in the air, having picked up that decisive victory, but we have to say the attention is more on Daniels. The end of Bad Influence a few months ago, the end of his tag team with Kazarian and Daniels last week. Now the question, is this the end of Daniels? He returns to his feet. Bryan expects maybe more to come, but Daniels has nothing left. One thing we can point out is that this was a different Christopher Daniels tonight. He didn't bring any shenanigans, any attempts to cheat. He wanted a competitive match with Bryan. He wanted to prove he was better than him. Unfortunately, he didn't. But we have to say that in a sense, he did take Danielson's words on board, and he did live up to what he said earlier on. Taking a moment to take in his surroundings, we try and really emphasise the idea that this could be Daniels' last night in TNA. He then offers a hand to Bryan Danielson, pretty out of character considering he was attacking him this time last week. But on the basis of the display in the match, Danielson almost reluctantly shakes his hand and makes it clear to him that this isn't about them having a friendship or anything, but about him showing respect for what he brought specifically on the night. The body language of Daniels suggests that his pre-match words weren't just bluster and weren't just trying to add some stakes. He shakes his head and appears emotional as he leaves the ring. Of course, we've seen him as this dickish heel for a long time, so this will be a little bit of a jarring thing to see from Christopher Daniels. A humbled, downbeat side to him. Frankie Kazarian comes out from the back, his best friend, followed by Desmond Wolfe, who's had a little bit of an on and off relationship with him throughout 2010. Kazarian tries to talk with Daniels. Clearly he's not discussed this with his best friend, while Wolfe tries to give him a hug, or as much as he can, with his arm in a sling. While his one arm is around Daniels, Wolfe bizarrely keeps his gaze locked on Bryan Danielson. Almost a suggestion here that he's only coming out to comfort Daniels so that he can try and make Bryan look bad, or there is some ulterior motive. Bryan Danielson remains in the ring as Daniels, Kazarian and Desmond Wolfe leave, and the question we have as we go into the final commercial break of the show, is this the end of Christopher Daniels in TNA? Returning to the final part of the show, it is a group who are just getting started in TNA as the new age come out from the back. Jimmy Jacobs leading them in addressing the audience, and of course he's joined by Sunday's victorious trio. Jimmy Jacobs puts over this victory as a great moment, but it was just that, a singular step on a much larger path. He doesn't want to downplay Chris Hero knocking Sting out cold and pinning him 1, 2, 3. In fact, the opposite. I really want to put that over because I think Hero getting a pinfall victory over Sting after being in the company for less than a month is a really big thing. He says that this is a journey that most won't even realise they're taking until it's over and they reach that destination. He is taking every single person watching, whether they're in the impact zone or whether they're watching at home, whether they believe in the project or whether he has to drag them kicking and screaming. Jacobs promises in 6 months from tonight, TNA will be completely unrecognizable. That's a key line in the promo. It's not just a throwaway line. I truly believe that with the way that the New Age's storyline goes and how things are going to kick off in 2011, this company will be very, very different in the new year and beyond. Before Jimmy Jacobs can lay out what that means for the project, Jeff Hardy enters, walking down to the ring and going into enemy territory. The commentators try and put this over as a brave move considering that he, AJ Styles and Sting were defeated by these three, so for him to go in there alone, the odds are certainly against him. But Jeff Hardy carries a bag behind him, pretty much like Jake Roberts would have carried his bag with a snake in it, but that's not what Hardy has with him. He says that as bad as Sunday was, he's still also pissed off about 10-10-10 and he wants to make it more about that, the humiliation, the ruining of his and Sting's moment, and not just the loss last night. This isn't about wins and losses, this is about what the New Age are trying to do. Emptying the bag, Jeff reveals it to contain a huge, heavy steel chain, the same item, not the exact same one, but symbolically, a steel chain was what was wrapped around his throat by Tyler Black on 10-10-10. He hasn't forgotten that, and he challenges Black to face him one-on-one, no outside involvement, in a chain match next week. Jacobs looks to speak on Black's behalf, but Tyler takes the microphone from him. 2 simple words: I accept. Jimmy Jacobs may look shocked, but both men are ready. They briefly go face to face, but that's all Jeff was here for. He's certainly not here to try and fight 3-on-1, so he leaves, heading up the ramp. Jimmy Jacobs doesn't look so sure about this, but it's confirmed a huge main event for next week's Impact, a match that I've had in mind pretty much as long as I've had the idea to bring Tyler Black in. I think Hardy v Black is going to be an incredible main event next week, and while it's not the best rated segment, it does advance the storyline. A lot of green notes, other than Jeff Hardy struggling a bit when going off the script, but I think that is a huge hook for next week's show and a big way to end a really good episode of Impact. An 80 rating makes it one of the best Impacts we've done, I'm pretty sure. I think we've had one at 81, but other than that, I think we are looking at possibly the second best episode of Impact so far. I recorded Explosion as well, but I'm just going off what I can see on my screen now, so it might not sync up perfectly, but we get a recap of the initial phase of the World X Cup. We then get Sonjay and Sweeney explaining the format and giving an update on the scoreboard, which will be on the screen now. We then open with the 10 non-captains in the match, and this is for 5 points. So Zack Sabre Jr. wins this, last eliminating one of the Young Bucks, I think, and jumps Team UK up from having 3 points to having 8 points. So that puts them in second place. So from being on the brink of elimination, they're now one of the favourites to go through. There is, however, that all-important elimination match. Ada Okal and Jeremy Borash discussing the potential permutations as we go into the final match of Phase 1 of the World X Cup. One team is eliminated, and we really want to ramp up the drama for that. So Homicide is eliminated first by Eric Young. Puerto Rico were already qualified, so there's not much jeopardy in them staying in the match, and it does then put Canada into pole position to qualify. Okada then pins EY, doing pretty much the same for Team Japan. They're relatively safe, and we see their Team USA standing alone at the bottom. As things stand, they will be eliminated, and when Okada pins Douglas Williams, things are looking even worse. The X Division champion Kazuchika Okada stands between Team USA's qualification. We've got them home and dry on 12 points, Puerto Rico and Canada on 9, UK on 8, and Team USA on just 6, and a huge win for him over the X Division champion, no less. Roderick Strong picking up a victory, eliminating Team UK, and he is joined by Generation Me. They've qualified for the next phase at the last possible moment, through the skin of their teeth, you could say. But on the other hand, Roderick Strong has just pinned the X Division champion, the first time that we've seen anybody pin him since he won the title. I've just completed the re-signing of James Mitchell there, so glad to have him back on board after a 4-day absence. The guys from Too Fast, Too Furious gone. Kurt Angle doesn't think that Brooke Tessmacher can work the TNA style. Probably not a overly harsh criticism at this point, but we do see some potential in her. She went on to do okay in her TNA career, becoming the Knockouts champion, so hopefully she has that potential in this timeline as well. But that is the post-Turning Point episode of Impact, and that all-important episode of Explosion. The World X Cup will continue, as will the build to the final pay-per-view of the year, Final Resolution. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next week.